Okay, so once you've done your test prints and you're happy with how everything fits, and now we're ready to print the full body, we'll just go through and start saving out our parts as STL files. So I'm going to start from the top of my solid body tree and just go click it, save as new, and then um, you can make a folder for all your new files, like 327 uh, STLs or files. I already did printed something earlier today. That's why this is here. But normally I would just do 327. And then you have to switch to STL and then just name your part. So jaw. And I would just go through one by one, naming everything. Saving everything out. STL, stepper gear. Foot left. Oh shit. That's not what I wanted to do. Right. Well, make sure you don't do that. If you ever forget to change it to STL, you can just save over your master. It should fix itself. What I meant to do was do it as an STL, not a part file. Put right. Just going through, saving out all my parts. It takes a little bit longer because we got all the threads in there. If it's taking too long too, you could always go back to the STL settings, and you could lower these settings. But I like to keep it high so my parts come out high quality. Okay. So now that you exported out all of your parts, you need to slice them to upload it to your printer. So I use Cura, and it's free and it's amazing. I used to use Prusa Slicer, and I also have Simplified 3D. I've tried all of them. I think Cura is my favorite, like literally solely because of tree supports. I'm not sure if the others have tree supports as well. Um, but if you guys like my print quality, I think they come out pretty good. I'll give my files for my printers, although it's going to be different for each printer. I have a CR10S Pro V2, an Artillery Sidewinder X2, and a Prusa MK3, and I've sort of like finely tuned all of my profiles to get what I want. On the Prusa and the Artillery Sidewinder, I'm running a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and then on the I have two CR10S Pro V2s, and I'm running a 0.6 millimeter nozzle. So I'll share my profiles with you if you guys want. But now we're gonna go through, and I'm just gonna show you how I would print each of my parts and some of like the considerations that I go through. I'm gonna show you some of the considerations that I go through when I'm printing these things, um, to make sure that I have great prints. Okay. So in terms of like orienting your part, you always want to limit the amount of material you're using. Maybe you want to limit the amount of time. Um, but I'm just going to talk through like how I would orient these parts. So this is let's start with the back cover. The back cover is a part that not anyone is really going to see. So like it doesn't really matter that much. It's like we just need to print the part. You wouldn't want to print it like this because then you would need support, and Cura does a good job of showing you like which areas will need support. So I would print it on its back, and if you don't want to rotate, you could do press R and then do select align to face the build plate, and then just click whatever face you want to be on the ground, and then I'll do a control R to center it. This is a pretty simple part. If it was a highly detailed part, you might want to print it like this because you'll have a little bit of support in this area, but if you want something to be highly detailed, it's better to orient it in the Z direction because you get more layers, you get more layer resolution as it's building. But this is a pretty simple part. I would just print it just like how you see it here. So let's review the next part. So the body. So this part is going to be the part that uses the most amount of material. I would print it like this. So some considerations for this is like which orientation do I print it in? But I think the most important thing to consider here is that we're printing threads, and you want those threads to be high quality so that your 3D printed fasteners are going to fit into those threads. So that's sort of like the thing that sort of trumps everything else in this, print orientation decision. We're just going to get a lot of support on the front stomach, but that's fine. I'll show you guys how to clean that up later. But that's sort of the decision that will like trump all the other orientations. In terms of what else we'll do here, we're going to need support blockers. So every time you have a fastener, a spot with threads, we're going to use support blockers so that so those threads print nice and clean, and because otherwise we wouldn't be able to get the threads out. Whoops. So you're going to go on the left-hand menu and click support blocker, and then you're just going to make it sort of like roughly fit over these like cylinders, right? So I'm going to make one that's like pretty tall, and you don't want it to like jut out of the bottom either. And then you just sort of align it into place. And then can I copy this? Okay, so if you right click it, if you left click and then right click, you could do multiply selected to get a bunch of them and then just like move them into whatever position you need them in. Well, we need two more. I always forget if it's like plus the one that is already made, or is it just like exactly how many more you want? I think it's plus the one you, oh no, never mind. We got an extra, that's fine, I'll just delete it in a sec. Sometimes you gotta move around to get the correct orientation. See, like this one's a little messed up. And then maybe we lower all of these a little bit. Lower this one. Okay. So we're going to get some support, but That's fine. So any part that like I want like higher detail, I'll print on my Prusa or artillery Sidewinder because I have that smaller nozzle. And then anything that like, detail doesn't matter as much, I'll print on my CR10S Pro V2s because they have that larger nozzle height, but they'll print faster. Like large parts that don't really matter that much, like maybe the back piece, I'll print on my CR10 just because it doesn't matter as much, and it'll print faster. Maybe the wings too, because they're kind of flat. But for something like this, where like the detail, we want pretty good detail on this, I'll probably print this on. So right now I'm going to print it on a 0.2 millimeter layer height. So 21 hours, a little less than a day. I always make sure to go into preview, and then I'll go like, looks like we're good, but I'll go layer by layer just to make sure there's no support where I don't want it. So like we're going to use a decent amount of material. We're going to use like a quarter of a roll just on this part, but that's fine. I mean, you can't really do anything else just because we want our threads to be nice and detailed. So that is the body, and that's probably the most annoying part. I would probably group the feet up together, and maybe I would probably print them so that the bottom of the foot is on the build surface. So, and then I'll press Control R and orient them. So this will get no support. Pretty easy print, should be pretty quick. Okay, so that orientation that I just showed for these feet is if like you want to reduce speed as much as possible and reduce the amount of material used because you'll have like no support. But if you wanna, if your idea is to reduce the amount of time that you'll spend sanding because you're going to sand, prime, and paint this thing and try and make it look nice, that's not the best orientation. The best orientation would be to make sure that whatever the longest dimension is or whatever the dimension is that you care about the most, that's going in the Z direction because you're going to develop a bunch of layers to really define that shape. Like if we printed like this, like how many layers are there going to be? Not that many, right? Like the back is going to print flat. Maybe there's like 50 layers total. Like, so the back is finished. The back is finished at like layer 43, right? But if we flip it over this way and we do the same thing with the feet, where the feet are oriented in a way where they're like this, something like that. I didn't print this way because I'm kind of an idiot and I should have done it. Created more work for me while sanding. And I orient them. Like this is how it should be printed if you want to save as much time as possible while sanding. But you may use a little bit more support, may take a little bit more time to print, but this is going to give you the cleanest print in terms of like actual print quality. Because you're going to have more layers to really define the shape. So let's see how many layers this outputs. So we used a little more support, but like before it was at 48 or whatever. Now it's at 300. So you have like a ton more layers to really define the shape. You get cleaner definition. You have to do less sanding and less filling. And it all depends on what you want, right? If you want save material and reduce support, then you do the other way. If you want to spend less time sanding because this is going to give you a cleaner part, then you do it this way. So the jaw. So a couple considerations. So probably the way that would be the best would be like something like this normally, right? Because we could probably get away with using like very little support material. But how we're going to print this for this orientation is like on its side, because what matters the most here is that this profile is like basically perfect. We don't want any support material where the servo arm is going to fit, because if a little plastic gets stuck in there, that's going to affect how the servo arm fits. So I would print this just like this to make sure that you get like a super smooth orientation for your print. So it's going to use a little bit more support material. You're going to get support material under here and here. But it's, at the end of the day, especially with tree supports, it's not that much material, but it means we're going to get no support in here, which is the most important part. So delete that. So the skull. So for the skull, you could honestly go back and like modify the horn so they're not like jutting out as much, but there's like two orientations that you could do, right? Like you could do it like this or like this maybe. Both would be good. The orientation that I'm probably going to do is like this, because my consideration is that you'll get good quality where the ultrasonic sensors fit in, because you're printing in the Z direction. You're not going to get any material on the inside of the ultrasonic sensor like tubes. And also remember what I said, where if you want quality, if you want something to look nice, you have to print it in the Z direction. So since the skull is like a piece that everyone is going to see, we want pretty good quality on it. So it's best to orient it building upwards. We're going to get a little bit of support, which is fine. One thing that we will have to do is we definitely don't want support in these holes where the thread forming screws go for the servo motor. So one thing that we'll have to do is use a support blocker and cover both of those holes. So you'll want to position it so that there's support. There's no support in the hole, but you're not blocking this area that needs support. And the same thing goes for here. I'm going to probably print it just like that. So you get some support on the bottom and some that is going to the top here. So if we preview this, so yeah, we'll use a bunch of support on the bottom. That's fine. Make sure there's no support in those holes there. But this is going to give us really good quality in the skull, and like some support that we'll have to take off, but like everything will fit correctly the way that we want it to fit. And then the rest of the parts you could probably just print all together depending on the size of your build plate, because they're like mostly flat. These parts are easy. The wings, you know what? The wings I would actually print. Maybe this is probably what you do. The wings you probably print together, because you want those to be light. So I would use like a super low. Normally for everything, I'll use like 15 to 20% infill. And unless it's a case where it actually matters. So like for the wings, you want them to be as light as possible so that the stepper motor can lift them up and down. So I might print them at like 10 infill or something like that. But for the stepper beam and stepper motor, you want these pieces to be solid. You want these pieces to be super strong, because the gear is going to do a bunch of rotating and then driving the gear train, and then this piece you want to be solid to like really hold down the stepper motor. So I might print these at 100% infill. That's probably what I would do. All right, so that's how to orient your parts. I'll see you in the next video. Also, if it's your first time in the software, you're going to have to add your printer. So if you go to settings, printer, manage printers, or add printer, unless you want to put it on a network, I usually just do add a non-network printer. And then it has like basically every version of every printer on here. You just need to find your version. So like if I was doing the Prusa, I would go to I go to Prusa 3D and then do my Prusa i3 Mark III and then press add. And then I'll already have pretty good settings to use. And then you could like tweak those accordingly to whatever you want to use. We're also going to need like 7 or 8 of these bolts that we made. So I'm going to orient it on the bottom of its head and then make a uniformly scale a support blocker, and then just press Control A and then multiply selected. Do like 7, I don't know, in case one breaks or whatever. And that's how I would print all the bolts together.